And we're going to go live right now. Hello, and welcome to our Classic Car Auto Insurance AMA. And I am Martin Milligan with WSI, and I am joined by Raul Carvajal, who's going to answer all of your classic car questions. Uh, Raul, why don't you give our folks some background on you so that they know that they are talking to a real live insurance expert instead of just a guy like me who doesn't really know anything about insurance.
Sure, thanks. So I'm Raul Carvajal. I am a licensed and appointed agent with American National Insurance. I'm licensed in Pennsylvania, Maryland, West Virginia, Virginia, and New York. So I deal with classic car coverages. We have a great program at American National. So I'm excited to be able to answer some questions, maybe dispel some mistakes or rumors that are out there, and offer an opportunity to chat with anybody that has more questions.
Excellent. And this live stream questions came from the the Car Club, the Mopar mailing list. Most of them came in well in advance of the live stream, so we probably won't we'll only be asking live stream questions that come up that are not duplicated to our list. And maybe some folks from the Liberty Gearheads are also going to come over from that Facebook group. So I got questions from both sets of folks, so we're going to kind of walk through those. And like I said, if anything pops up on the live chat, it's not a duplicate. We'll cover that as well. Now, we've only got a half hour, so we really need to hurry up and get through these. We got quite a long list from the club. So the first question was a pretty basic one. Do I have to have another car for everyday driving if I have a collector's car policy?
It's a great question. It's a very common one. I do hear that one a lot. And the answer is really dependent on how you want to structure your policies. So there's a couple different ways you can do it. You can have a standalone classic car policy and then your normal everyday vehicles on a separate policy. Other times, it might make sense to combine them, use the same liability limits across the board for all of your vehicles, pay one bill, but have those special coverages in place for that collector car that you're keeping in your inventory.
So each person's specific situation seems like it would dictate the answer to that question.
It will. It'd be important to sit down, understand the full scope of the liabilities that you face, understanding all of your risks, and you and your agent having a conversation on what's the best way to cover those risks. I would say, as a general rule of thumb, uh, yes, you can lump them all under one policy as long as your carrier that you're with allows that option.
Right. But it also sounds like if I lived in a city where I really didn't need a car, but I had a vacation home where I wanted to keep a collector car, that would make sense too, and I could do that.
That situation would absolutely make sense, exactly as you explained it. Yes, sir.
Excellent. Second question came in is a little more complicated. It talks about the driving a collector car as an actual car. So can I drive my collector car to work or to the store? Or if I had to go on a vacation, could I take my collector car? Say I had an antique station wagon. I wanted to take the family on the Griswold family vacation.
So this one is going to be very specific to your insurance carrier. One of the things that I can say about American National is we have very generous allotments when it comes to the miles that you drive in your car. Some policies are very restrictive. There are other carriers out there that will only allow, to and from car shows, maybe a parade here and there, and that's it. They're super restrictive. Our policies aren't that way. It's not something that you want to be driving every day. You're not driving it to and from work and school, but you're taking it on vacation, smaller driving limits like that. Absolutely. You have this car because you want to drive it. It's a great time. It's a great feeling to be behind the wheel of a really nice car and everybody's turning their heads to look at you. Of course you want to be on the road with it. And so at least for American National, I can say that we do understand that, and we want you to be able to use your car as you want to.
Excellent. And a note for a side note, not an insurance note, but a licensing note. A lot of times states have restrictions on how much you can drive your car based on the type of license plates that you get. So you always have to be careful about that.
Great point. Yes.
The next one is about the family. Can I let my kids or other family members, those that live with me and those that don't live with me, drive my collector car?
That, in the insurance terms, yes, you can let anybody that you give permission to that is licensed and legally able to drive, you can give them permission to drive your car, and they would have coverage if anything happened to the car. Whether or not that's a good idea or not, I'll leave that up to everyone else. I know I probably wouldn't be letting my kids get behind the wheel of, my collector car, but you can do it in the sense of, will they be covered? Yes.
Well, I used to have a group of people working for me, and I had a collector car with a manual transmission. And whenever we succeeded at something, a lot of times part of the perks had something to do with the collector car. And I taught one of the young men who worked for me how to drive a manual transmission in it. So I'm probably one of those people who kind of generates the need for this kind of question. And I think the next one is something that I think you covered before, but it's a very common use for a collector car. Is, can I use my collector car in a parade?
Right, and so I did allude to that a little bit earlier. Again, it's going to be based on the type of policy that you have with your current carrier. Please take the time to review your policy language. I can speak for American National. Yes, you would be allowed to use your car in a parade, but that's a conversation that you want to sit down and you want to have with your agent. If you don't have an agent that you can talk to, this would be a great opportunity to reach out to me. I'd be happy to sit down with you and look at your current policy that's in place and explain to you what coverages you have and what you don't.
And I'm assuming that a lot of carriers look at parades a little bit differently than everyday use, just because there's so many people around the vehicle and there's so many opportunities for either a damage claim or a liability claim.
They do look at it different. You are correct about that. Every carrier is a little different in how they classify parades or the limits around them. But yes, it is definitely viewed as different than everyday driving. But you want to make sure that you understand what your policy limits are before you register for an event like that.
Okay. And the next one's one of our specialized, another specialized use question, which I'm not sure the background on this, but somebody asked, can I loan my collector car for use in a movie or commercial? I'm assuming a music video or something like that also would fit into that.
That's a great question. I like that one. And this one is a little trickier. So your car would not be covered typically under a normal collector car policy in those situations. Normally what's going to happen is the production itself is going to either go out and find a policy to cover whatever they're doing, or you might have to seek out a special policy just for that use during that time. But typically that type of usage is not going to be covered in your policy.
And I take it that even if I'm using my own collector car in my own commercial, I should be very careful about making sure that the car is covered during that time.
Again, it's a great conversation to sit down with your agent and just make sure that you have everything covered. The worst thing that could happen is for you to experience a loss and your insurance doesn't respond the way that you expected it to respond.
And I mean, it's something that's good for business owners to keep in mind whenever they are doing their own commercials and creating content for their advertising, is that having people on your premises for other reasons than your normal business might be something worthwhile talking to your business policy or your insurance agent about your business policy. Because not just your collector car, but things in your business might be put at risk if you do something like that.
That's a great point. You're right on.
Excellent. Well, I did work in insurance in the data processing side of it, so I've seen a little bit of it. But it's so nice to be able to have Raul here to come in and answer questions for me, because I do not I'm not, a professional insurance person. I just play one on YouTube. So the last use question that came in is about using your collector car in a racing fashion. So can I race my collector car at the drag strip or on a road course?
This is another one of those tricky ones. Again, it's going to depend on the policy and the language. I'm sure everyone's going to get tired of hearing me say that by the time this video is over. Uh, Typically, the answer is going to be no. Racing is going to be a very specialized use, and so you're going to need to have a special policy for something like that. It's not typically included in your standard collector car insurance coverage that you would pick up.
And I take it that, even now that, there's performance is back with the big three and people are taking their Mustangs and Shelbys and Dodge Challengers and Camaros and new mid-engine Corvettes to the drag strip and seeing just how fast they are. And you can go out and buy a 700 horsepower daily driver these days. A lot of people are taking their daily drivers to the drag strip, and they probably should talk to their insurance agent before they do that as well, and not try to hide it.
It's absolutely worth having the conversation. Again, like a broken record here, just make sure that you have the coverages in place so that if something happens, you're not surprised.
Right, and trying to deal with it after the fact is probably the worst plan.
You're right.
All right, now we're getting into a little bit more complicated in the loss sections questions. So the next question was, how is the value of my car calculated, and is it changed when I have a loss?
Very common question. There's a few different ways that carriers will handle this one. What I can speak on is American National, and so we go on an agreed upon value. So let's say you come to me and you say, Raul, I want you to insure my Mustang. Okay, great. We're going to take a look at it together, and we're going to say, what value do you place on that car? We're going to agree upon the value, and then we're going to insure it for that amount. If we can't come to an agreement, then we can have a third party do an appraisal, and then we're going to go off of that value. And what we're not going to do is go off of some blue book that's going to be a diminished value that's not really accurate. There's no way that you can be accurate with those kind of results. And so we're going to sit down, we're going to have a conversation about the car. What modifications have you put into it? There's a lot of hard work and time and money that goes into a nice car. We want to make sure that you're covered in the event of a loss. So we're going to sit down and we're going to agree upon a value before we move forward.
Yeah, and it's I think the takeaway here is that when you see your agent, you should ask for a policy that has an agreed value, not a replacement cost value.
Correct.
All right. The next question continues in the idea of a loss. Can I decide where to take my car? Can I decide where my car is repaired in the event of an accident?
If I'm your agent and your policy is with American National, yes, we let you choose the garage. We want you to trust the work is being done by the people that you want to do the work. We want to make sure that you're using original equipment parts. We're not just going to find somebody and force you into that shop. We're going to let you pick. Again, other carriers handle those claims a little differently, so talk to your agent. But yeah, that's important to us. We understand, again, the time and money and effort that goes into these beautiful machines that we have, and we want to make sure that they're cared for the right way. Everybody has a trusted mechanic, and we want to make sure that you can still use them.
It sounds like the way a loss is handled is something that you should really talk to your agent about when you're taking out the policy, and use that in your buying decision, not just shopping on price.
That's a great point. There are a lot of things to consider. Like I mentioned earlier, do they allow for original equipment manufacturer parts? OEM parts are a big deal. I know they are for me. I know they are for all of my other clients that own classic cars. I want to use my own garage. Everybody that I know wants to use their own garage. If there's a total loss, what value is placed on that? That's important. We want to make sure that we're getting enough to be made whole again. We're not going to be cut a check for a couple $1,000s and now we're starting all over with nothing. So those are all important decision factors that you've got to take in place there.
Great. We're kind of coming back onto the coverages questions now. Should I have the same coverages on my collector car as I have on my daily driver?
When you're talking about the coverages that you have, you need to look at what is your, I guess, position. So your liability coverages, is it really, if you end up in an accident and you're at fault, are you really going to want a less limit to save some cash because you're using your collector car that you don't drive as much? I'm going to want the same protection. And so that would be my recommendation, is that yes, you have the same limits, and please, please don't have state minimum limits on your coverages. Sit down with your agent, talk about some higher limits. You'd be amazed at how inexpensive it is for, $100,000-$200,000 worth of liability coverage versus your $25,000 or $50,000 that you might currently have in place. But yes, you would want to extend those same higher liability limits to your collector car, because whether you're behind the wheel of your Mustang or your or your Ford Taurus, you could still be at fault in an accident. And in that time, your insurance is going to need to respond and make sure that everyone is taken care of.
And as inexpensive as it is to increase the liability for your normal cars, it's because your collector car is driven a lot less. Increasing those limits to match is really not that expensive. See, the next one has to deal with, and you can tell we had a couple of business owners asking some of these questions. This one is about an umbrella policy. How does my collector car policy affect my umbrella policy?
So your collector car policy is just another policy that you would have. Under normal circumstances, that should fall under that same umbrella. Your umbrella is providing additional liability coverages. And so with American National, the way that I'm going to set up your policies, we're going to structure them all under the same umbrella. That way you have those extended liability coverages no matter which policy we're talking about. Again, talk to your agent and make sure that it's the same case with your carrier, but your umbrella should be picking up the liability and extending it for your collector car on top of your home, your auto. If you're talking about business, all of that should be underneath your umbrellas. Yes.
And I take it if I go to somebody for my collector car insurance and they don't ask me about an existing umbrella policy, I should take that as a red flag that they may not be asking me all the pertinent questions that are needed to be asked.
So one of the things that I find when it comes to collector cars is we have our home and our auto and even maybe an umbrella all with one carrier. But then when it comes to a collector car, we go online and we shop the absolute cheapest possible coverage we can find. And so it's not with the same carrier. You don't have an agent that's taking care of it. And so it's not listed underneath your umbrella. You're setting yourself up for loss there. Your agent should be taking care of that, putting it all together, making sure that all of your policies make sense, that they complement each other, and that they're all working for you, not random policies pulled off of this website and that website and piecemealed together.
Excellent. The next question has to do with, we've got a couple questions here about restorations. And they get a little complex because there's the, so I'll just kind of go through a couple of these. Can I take out a policy for a car that is waiting on a restoration and has an accumulation of parts collected? And there was a lot of footnotes to this question, but I didn't include that made it real complicated. Because I guess the concern is that a lot of times people will take years gathering up, original assembly line style parts. And so, if you go to a restoration company and maybe buy, some trim piece that's a reproduction for a couple $100, or you could go and buy a dealership NOS part for maybe a couple $1,000. But if you find an original assembly line part, it might be $10,000. And so, the idea is that you could have a very large amount of money just in an accumulation of parts before the car even starts its journey into restoration.
That's a great point. That's how a lot of people like to approach putting their cars together. These are projects. These are our babies, for lack of a better term, right? We take care of them as if they were a child. There's a lot of time and energy and a lot of money, as you just mentioned, that goes into these things. And so, yes, you want to make sure that you're protected in those situations. I certainly do offer policies like that. We would take a look at the current value of the parts and whatever pieces of the car you have today. And then as you continue to build that car, we would increase the value of the vehicle to match until we have a finished showroom quality, perfect, eye catching beauty driving up and down the road. We're there from the beginning all the way through completion.
And that kind of covers our next one on the can I insure a collector car under restoration? And this one here probably is a little bit more complicated because there were a couple noted incidents recently where the shop that was doing the work was either burglarized or had a fire breakout during a car where cars were there, and the question came up of is it the shop's insurance policy or is it the owner's insurance policy that has to deal with that, or both?
That one certainly gets tricky, especially when we start having a business owner's policy with one carrier and a collector car policy with someone else. That's something that the insurance companies are going to have to settle out. As I understand the question, the business owner's policy should be the one to respond there. They should have the coverage in place for theft or any loss to any product that they've taken into their shop. And so that's how it should respond. Again, it depends on the policy languages. But when you have an agent, like me, for this reference, that would be, hey, Raul, this is what happened. Okay, I'll get on it. And, trust that I'm going to take the next action and we're going to get it resolved and make sure that you're made whole by whatever means necessary.
Great. And one of the practice that I have is that a lot of times, even when you hire a restoration shop, a lot of times it's hard to find one shop that can do everything for you, and sometimes you'll be moving the car from shop to shop. So I always make sure I maintain my policy during restoration, even knowing that if it's at the shop, it's the shop policy may cover it, but you never are really sure whether the shop may have a lapse in their policy. They may exceed their limits. Your car may be damaged during transportation, and the transporter and the shop start pointing fingers at each other. Maintaining your coverages during restoration is very important.
Excellent points, all true. Absolutely.
Okay. This next one is, I'm not sure where the source of this question was. I don't remember who submitted it, but they apparently live in multiple states, which must be nice. They have houses in a couple different places. And the question is, I keep my collector car in a different state than where I live. Should I get license plates and insurance there?
So the state laws are a little different in every state. So I will defer that question about registering the vehicle, but you definitely want your insurance policy to be set up in the state that the car is being stored. So if you're keeping it in another state, you would want to reach out and make sure that that car is covered in that state that it's actually being stored, because that's potentially where the loss could happen.
And now that you mention it, I actually had this problem happen to me. I had a car that I was storing in Pennsylvania when I was living well, I was living in Maryland and I moved to West Virginia and I stored the car in Pennsylvania during that move. And I had a loss while it was in storage and the insurance policy was still in Maryland. So that was a big problem, and fortunately it worked out for me. But if I would have addressed that earlier, I didn't realize that this question covered me, but I actually have a lot of experience with it. So we have another question that's more of a legal question, and maybe sometime I'll get a lawyer on. Now we're going to kind of shift over and take the questions that came in during the live stream.
Sure.
All right. And it looks like most of them are going to be, looks like we got a very specific question from one of our Mopar mailing list members. And ironically, it's about his Mustang. Because I have a 2000, let's see, my question is about putting a modern special interest vehicle on collector's insurance. I have a 2012 Mustang GT convertible full coverage with Allstate, but two classics with Hagerty. I'm aware Hagerty also insures new specialty interest vehicles, and I'd like to know about restrictions. The car is a weekend toy with only 15,000 miles, but I'd like to be able to take the occasional vacation with it.
So that's a pretty common situation that I run into. With American National, we do offer those modern collectible coverages with our policies. Yes, you are going to be able to take it on vacation, things like that. If you're asking about the type of coverage that you have right now, I'd be happy to sit down and review your policy with you, or you're going to need to reach out to your agent and ask that question. But if you were one of my clients, yes, you would have that option.
And it's really good to point out that we tend to look to the specialty companies that advertise an awful lot. But a lot of times our regular insurance agent can take care of a lot of our specialty needs if we talk to them and ask them the right questions.
There's some agents only focus on a couple different lines. I'm what you would call a multi-line agent. So I take care of a wide range from business or farms, auto, home, life insurance. I handle all of that. And the concept of my business that I'm running is I want you to have one person that you can go to and have whatever needs you may face met with only one person that you have to interact with. It makes it a lot easier for you, the client. It makes it a lot easier for me, the agent, to understand all of your risk and make sure that all of your policies are in place and protecting your assets, and without having to piece things together and the unknowns of policies maybe being with different carriers.
And also, it's a good idea to shop around a little bit. For example, I know that in the past I've had some very low mileage newer cars that when I shopped around agents who were used to dealing with classic cars, they were able to lower my premiums considerably. That it wasn't just having a collector car, but having an agent who understands collector cars could be a big benefit, even if you only have modern cars. If you have some specialty cars or cars that get very low miles throughout the year.
Absolutely, you're head on. You want somebody that you can trust, that they know what they're talking about. That's very important. That's what you're paying for, right? You're paying for somebody to understand the intricacies of all of these different policies and making sure that they work the right way, because it's complex and it's not something that the average guy is going to take the time to learn about to be able to do it themselves. So yeah, making sure that you have a good agent that understands all of it is very, very important.
It's amazing how much money you can save when you have an expert help you. You think that the expert's going to be more expensive, and they are, but you're really paying more for the specialty knowledge that you need, and you're not paying the learning curve for the inexperienced person that you're dealing with.
That's it.
The next question is on storing a classic car. So in storing a classic car for winter, do you advise changing some of the coverages while it's in storage?
If it's not going to be in use at all, then yeah, I mean, for my clients, yeah, we have those conversations. What I find is that sometimes it makes sense to make some changes. Sometimes it doesn't because the sun might come out and the roads are clear, and you know what? We're just going to take this out for a little bit, and so you know, the uncertainty of, okay, it's Saturday morning and I'm just going to decide to take my car out. Oh, now I've got to make sure that my policy's back in force. It might not make sense for you. So that's a great question to have a one-on-one conversation with an agent about, to understand what your needs are and what exactly is it that you're looking at.
Yeah, and I've usually found that it's not the insurance that's the problem with this, it's the plates. And that if you drop your coverage, you're going to a lot of states are now getting very, very aggressive about making you turn in the plate. It used to be you could take the
Hmm.
car off the road for 3 months, cancel the insurance, and put it back on, and the state wouldn't bother you. Now, a lot of times, as soon as that insurance gets dropped, the state is coming after you to turn in the plate. So that's something to keep in mind, especially if you're in either Maryland or Pennsylvania.
Yeah, great point. I can tell you for my clients, I don't completely drop coverage anywhere. I haven't run across anybody that was even looking for something like that. I don't recommend completely dropping the coverage in the off seasons every year. Uh, but what we could look at is, maybe changing the deductible limits or changing the liability that's in place to try to save some cash while it's just sitting in the garage.
That's a good point. And although a lot of times it might just be more work than it's worth to do that because of how inexpensive some of those coverages are. And like you said, I've always found that the collector car insurance on a car that gets very few miles is so inexpensive that saving the 2 or 3 months isn't really worth it. Um, but that's, I guess I'm money bags.
No, you're spot on there. I again looking at different policies, understanding the way that these policies are structured. You're absolutely dead on. Even though you claim not to be an insurance expert, there, Marty, you that's exactly it. Um, you leave the coverages in place because it's really not that much to go from bare bones state minimum to something that's actually going to protect you and your assets, protect your family, protect your net worth, all of those things that are really important.
Yeah, and our questioner came back with a little bit more detail. And they were thinking of dropping their collision and keeping comprehensive on the car in storage.
Uh, so again, that's something that I would recommend sitting down, having a one-on-one conversation, understanding the whole situation, uh, and it's also going to depend on your carrier and how things are structured. Some places aren't going to let you do that. Some places will. So that's certainly more of a one-on-one question.
Yeah, I've always had trouble purchasing comprehensive separate from collision.
Hmm.
That's been my experience is that the even when the company will allow it, the agent is discourages it. Let's see. I think, well, we were a little bit over time, and we were finally out of questions. Man, I tell you, those were some really good questions that came in this week. I tell you, I didn't. There were some ones that were out there. I appreciate you taking the time to talk with us, Raul. It is so important to bring in somebody who is knowledgeable and an expert like you to come in and give real answers when enthusiasts have problems and questions. So I really thank you for your time.
No, I thank you for the invite, the opportunity. It's been a lot of fun. I can talk about cars all day, every day. It's one of my passions. It's what I love. Anytime I can provide some good information to a group, I'm happy to do so. Have me come back anytime.
Well, we're going to be posting this video to my YouTube channel and to a couple Facebook channels, and we'll make sure we have Raul's contact information for folks who have a question. And Raul, what states do you write in, just in case we need to recommend somebody outside of your license area?
Sure. So I'm licensed in West Virginia, Virginia, Maryland, Pennsylvania, and New York. And if you're outside of one of those states and you need to talk to somebody, I've got a pretty good connection, anywhere from about here to the Mississippi River. So I can throw some names out there.
Great. Yeah, because having somebody you trust and is super knowledgeable is so great. I got to tell you, I mean, I really learned over the years that not you know not the trying to find the biggest bargain, but trying to find the person who's the most knowledgeable has paid dividends so many times, and it's saved me so much money over the course of the years that I really recommend that. So again, thank you very much. We're going to end the stream right now. I'd like to thank everybody who offered us questions. Man, you guys were this was a really good stump the band one. So again, thank you all very much, and we'll see you on our next one.
Thanks, everybody.